Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Tax Increment Finance Joint Review Board. Hillary, are you calling the roll? Or is someone calling the roll? And this would be an introduction of the members, actually. So.
Jennifer Ivory Tatum.
En route.
And she's with the Urbana School District. Mm-hmm. Tim Bartlett with Urbana Park District.
Here.
Travis Woodcock from Champaign County. Here. Ivana Owana, Cunningham Township.
Here.
Brock Martin, Champaign County Forest Preserve. Here. Michelle Wright, CUMTD.
Here.
Chris Randalls, Parkland College. City of Urbana, Diane Marlin.
Here.
And our public member, Laura Orcutt.
Here. We have quorum. Next item on the agenda is selection of the public member, and I believe that would be Laura Orcutt. Can I get a motion to do that?
So moved.
Second? Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Congratulations. And next we need to select a chair. Could I have a motion for a chairperson? I'm happy to volunteer.
I move to appoint Mayor Marlin as chair.
I second. I second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That motion is approved. We'll move on to review of the minutes, and that's from February 8th, 2024, and that's included in your packet. Is there a motion for approval?
Move to approve the February 8th, 2024 minutes.
There's second.
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Ivory Tatum. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? That motion passes. Next item is public comment. Does anyone wish to address this joint review board for the TIF district? Seeing no comments, we'll move on to the overview of TIF activities and projects, the TIF report, and that'll be made by Will Kolchowski.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Make sure your mic's on.
I know. I know a couple of you. For the folks that you don't know me, my name is Will Kolchowski. I'm the Senior Management Analyst and Assistant to the City Administrator at the City of Urbana. We have a couple staff vacancies in the Economic Development Division, so this past year it's really been a team effort as far as TIF management and enterprise zone management goes. So a lot of the work that you'll see today has really only been done from the help of Mike McMahon, who's been helping on a contractual basis, and Hillary, especially with the enterprise zone. So there's a lot of, I get the pleasure of doing the presentation, but a lot of the work that made all this happen happened by other folks. So if you have a very particular question, I'll do the best that I can to answer, but you might get an answer from somebody else.
And I would point out Hillary Ortiz is a member of the Community Development Services Department and has done a lot of the work in helping prepare this today.
So the presentation that we have here, well, the TIF reports are for the fiscal year FY24. So that's the year that ended in at the end of June. I'll talk a little bit about some year-to-date activity for this fiscal year, just because we've had a lot happen, and I think it's good to talk about. They're fun, exciting projects, so they're worthwhile to talk about. But a lot of the data that we'll see on the front half of the presentation will just be things that happened in the previous fiscal year. So we like to start just with the basics of TIF, for the folks, the public, or who might not be aware, but the TIF is a tax increment financing district where the increment from new development is, in short, used to incentivize development that, but for that increment or that incentive, would not occur. And the life of a TIF is 23 years. We try to use that increment to advance the goals of the redevelopment project plan to achieve higher property tax values, in a nutshell. You could take a whole course on this, but this is the TIF as a whole. So we'll kind of move on to a brief overview of the TIF reports that were in your packet, starting with TIF 4. So you'll see TIF 4 expires on December 31st of this year. I put an asterisk there, and we'll talk about that at the end of today's presentation. But you'll see the beginning balance, the revenues and expenditures, and the ending balance. And I'll touch on this again, but some of the ending balance, there's some infrastructure projects that we're undertaking in the TIF. So, those have some commitments that we expect to be several $1,000,000. So we have some planned programming for that and that fund balance for projects that are underway in the current fiscal year. So moving on to a couple projects or activities that are undertaken in TIF 4 is we have, and there's an IGA between the city, or the TIF, and the Park District to reimburse for improvements to parks. This is Carl Park, which is not in the TIF. It's just a nice picture, but as we have part of the IGA for between the city and the Park Districts, we'll reimburse improvements to the park, and that's an annual basis. Similarly, we have an agreement with the Urbana School District for vocational training, which is one of the goals of the TIF, or of any TIF, is for economic development, and we paid that. The last year was a little over $200,000 for that. Some other quick highlights that we have in the TIF, there's some personnel services and marketing and promotional service that we have. And then you'll see $162,000 for sidewalk and pavement patching improvements. A lot of that was in the planning. In this current fiscal year, we have about $2 million of infrastructure improvements focusing on sidewalks, on lighting, some patching, as well as a capital improvement project for Perkins and Cunningham Road. So didn't happen this previous fiscal year, but those are infrastructure projects that are underway. And that's something we've been trying to do with the potential end of TIF 4 is to, and with having a healthy fund balance, is to fund some of the more expensive infrastructure projects that we can. Moving on to Central TIF. Central TIF expires at the end of 2040. So it's a newer TIF. You'll see the beginning balance, the revenues, which are not quite as large, but given its youth is pretty impressive, and expenditures and the end balance as well. And this project, and this TIF as well, and Central TIF is the red TIF. The yellow TIF is TIF 2 that has expired. But in the Central TIF, there are some other projects that we expect to be relatively expensive, or potential projects that may be expensive on the horizon as it relates to site demolition and site preparation. And we'll get into that. Moving on to the projects in the Central TIF, we had a few signed grant programs that happened in the previous fiscal year. In our signage grant program, you can get a 50% reimbursement up to $3,000, depending on how much you spend. So you'll see the three here through Bowtie Games, and Kanto, and Grow 5. And then we had a couple other larger projects that payments were due in the TIF as well. So we had the Fish Alley, which is the redevelopment of that project that resulted in the new tenant, the Main Scoop. So that started in fiscal year 23, but last year there was the final payment under our redevelopment incentive program of $5,280. And our redevelopment incentive program, that's more of an administrative program where there's a whole bunch of criteria, and depending on how many boxes you check, you get a higher reimbursement rate up to a $35,000 max. We also closed out a longer-term development agreement that we had at the Cohen Building. The original agreement, I believe, was for $500,000, and then we inked it early on in the TIF, and they did their final portion of that project, and they had a small payout the previous year of $20,750, and I think they spent a little over $300,000 total. I wrote the round number down, not the exact number down. So they didn't quite get all their possible reimbursement under the agreement, but that project's now closed out. We also made our first payment to 200 South Vine Street for the development that occurred just north of here. That's 42 units of townhome developments, which was about $8 million at the time, which was pre-COVID. So in addition to donating land as part of this project, the incentive is a property tax rebate, and this property tax rebate's actually what they asked for was the enterprise zone rebate, but in a TIF. So a little bit about TIF and enterprise zone. They do overlap, and we have abatements as part of the enterprise zone. You cannot get an enterprise zone abatement in a TIF. So since they couldn't get the enterprise zone abatement, they asked for a TIF rebate. So that's 180, 60, 40, 20% rebate over a 5-year period. So I think we'll talk about it in the enterprise zone, but I think that shows the value that our enterprise zone abatements have, that when somebody was in a TIF, they just asked for what the enterprise zone was. But that's our first payment. So in future years, the next 4 years, you'll see that decrease by 20% or so each year. Another project that we undertook or began undertaking in that last fiscal year was the demolition of the former adult education building at the corner of Race and Griggs. This cost here is site prep and some holding costs, and to get the property ready for demolition. I think, if I heard correctly yesterday, I think we're out to bid this week for the demolition costs, but we do expect the demolition of that property to be fairly expensive. There is a fair amount of asbestos in it. I think in our budget we have a little over $1 million for it. So that's one of the expensive demolitions that we anticipate in the central TIF going forward. A couple other activities just to highlight real quickly. There's some personnel, some advertising and marketing, which we've tried to bring one of our goals through our council goals and through our placemaking plans that we have. Our public realm study is to really get a lot of people downtown. So we really focused on trying to bring people downtown, which you'll see in a few seconds with the agreements that we recently signed. But we also have other smaller things like cabanas that we've been doing for a long time as well. So I'll stop right there. Are there any questions about last fiscal year's activities in the TIF before I move on to some current activities? All right. So we've had a lot of fun and exciting and just great projects happen this year, or begin to happen this year. So I want to take a moment and give everybody some information on those. So the first, this is an old agreement that we've had for several years, but this is a project that we believe will probably close this fiscal year, or that they'll open this fiscal year, is the Hotel Royer, which was originally a $5.5 million agreement for the renovation of the hotel into a 128 boutique hotel room, the hotel tapestry with a bar, and all the amenities go with it. The basis of that agreement that we really tried to get into that was that we wanted the end product to be extremely high quality. And while it's taken them some time and a few missed deadlines, I think the folks that have been through the almost finished product so far have been really impressed with the quality of the end product. So it took a lot longer than we expected, but the goal of the agreement and what we've seen so far is that the quality of what we want that property to be will be delivered, or we expect to be delivered. And this is a fun one to talk about. This is H-Mart. This is a project that did not receive any city incentives. So that's a great TIF success story when you have developers looking to develop and they're not asking for a TIF agreement. So this was a vacant property with a vacant building. So I think when we talk in reference to needing some site preparation costs, if there's a good property without a development hurdle in the way, I think we can hopefully see development occur on those sites. So H-Mart's a good success story of a great product, but also a great redevelopment that didn't need the TIF. So I think that's a good sign going forward. We also have a request for proposals for development on the lots south of Illinois Street. This is something that is currently open. This is our second attempt. One of the things that we learned in going out is, given the size of the property, it's a little bit too small for your more national chains. You really have to rely on local developers. And thinking about local developers, you kind of they have timelines and workflows and capacities, and you have to time it right with them. But we think there's some interest in this site, and we're pretty hopeful that we'll get some responses to this particular proposal. But based off the success of 200 Vine to the north here, we're really excited about what we might receive in response to this request. There are two, I don't know if folks saw in the news, but there's two redevelopment agreements that the city recently signed in the Central TIF. The first is an expansion of CU Adventures. And I won't go over everything, but their concept's called Parcadia, which is a redevelopment of the big box in that picture there into, I think the best way to describe it is an immersive mini golf experience. So mini golf combined with escape room. And if you've been in their escape room, you know all the craftsmanship and the entertainment value that it provides. So this is something that we're excited for. I think something that we're also excited from a technical TIF perspective is this is a performance-based agreement that we signed with them where they have to meet minimum thresholds of golfers and food and beverage sales to reach their full incentive value, which is $210,000 over 5 years. So this is a great project that we had in this fiscal year. We also have Fernie's High Horse on 118 and 120 South Race. And this will be a destination event space, and and we recently, at the same day, we had signed the same development agreement. This is also a performance-based agreement where they have to have a minimum number of food and beverage sales and events to meet their full incentive, which was $258,000. So relatively modest incentives, proportional to the total project cost that are performance-based, and plus great end products are something that we're really excited about what's happening in the TIF this year. And then moving forward, there's a couple large-scale development sites that may happen in this next year or so. And those are the yellow stars here. You have the Civic Center site and the jail site, which are both large sites in our downtown area that can be suitable for redevelopment, although they would require demolition. So those are going to be potentially expensive demolitions, which the TIF will, would probably need to help subsidize to get the end product that we want. But especially with the TIF 4 and a healthy fund balance, we do have the option to port funds into the central TIF to help these key sites get developed. On this slide, I also added a couple green stars for projects that are currently underway in various different stages. You'll have the County Plaza redevelopment, which the county offices should be moving into fairly shortly. I put a little star over Black Dog, which should have Black Dog back in there at some point. There's a site for the school district, and then you'll see H Mart, CU Adventures, the new coffee shop in the corner of a really small and difficult property to redevelop, and then you'll have the Yards, which is the new food hall concept by the Smith Burger folks. So those are, if you'll see here, there's a lot of great things happening along Broadway on the north side of Urbana, and there's a couple big sites where we can keep that momentum going forward. And that kind of leads us to the last topic, which is the tentative TIF 4 extension. So the TIF 4 is near about 23 years old, but TIFs can be extended for 10 years. And the process for that is the city would request that from the state legislator, and they would put that into an annual TIF bill where TIFs are extended. As part of that process, we would need letters of support from our taxing bodies. So that's something that we plan on reaching out to you in the near term, just because the spring legislative session will close before we know it. And we had a lot of internal questions about whether or not we should close the TIF or extend the TIF. And there's a couple of reasons why we would like to extend TIF 4. There's been a lot of success. Maybe not all the sites have been developed as successfully as TIF 2 was, but some of the sites that are still ripe for development, there's probably some site assembly and site development costs that the TIF could help with, which those tend to be more expensive. There's also, we've been really trying to focus on highway-oriented development north of the highway on Cunningham, so think Farm and Fleet and some of the vacant area around there. One of our strategies that we've had is to really especially from a marketing perspective, lean into the Rantoul Sportsplex and try to get those visitors down to Urbana. This is the quickest shot, so we've been trying to get development to occur right around there. The TIF4 also has a healthy fund balance, and it can hopefully support some of the key central TIF initiatives, such as those large and expensive demolitions. Those aren't cheap. Those are, you can't wait for increment when you do that. So since we have some funds, and I think that's a good use for those redevelopment funds, and I think based off of some of the projects that we've seen in the Central TIF, Seawood Ventures, and the Fernies, what we really focused on is the entertainment and bringing people downtown, which hopefully will have positive effects on the Cunningham corridor as a whole, as we're bringing more people and more traffic into downtown. Since we do have a healthy fund balance, we probably don't need all of it. So if we extend the TIF, I think the idea is to distribute a portion of that fund balance as surplus to the taxing bodies on an annual basis. There's not a magic number of what that would be, but I think given the healthy amount, this is something that we can expect going forward, is that we probably don't need all the future increment every year absent a development. So if we don't get those large developments where we need the funds, I think the idea is to surplus some funds annually as appropriate. That is all I have.
Questions for Will?
Well, is it typical to have metrics associated to the TIFs, or is that relatively new, or just based on the developments?
For the development agreements?
Yeah.
It's newer for the city. That's always a goal for redevelopment agreements. The healthier the TIF gets, the general philosophy should be that the TIF gets a little bit more and more stringent. So when a TIF is usually first created, there's a lot of blight, a lot of vacancy, not a lot of opportunity. You take the deals that you can get, but I think as there's more demand and development pressure, you can start to bake in more restrictions into the agreement. I would say right now we don't have a vacancy problem per se in Urbana. What we really want to try to do is utilize these funds to incentivize the intensity of development and activity. So that was a tool that we tried to use. So we try to use it as whenever we can as appropriate.
And I would add the metrics also reflect our commitment to accountability for spending tax dollars. And that's something very important to the community as well.
It's appreciated.
Any other questions? Okay, then I will declare this meeting adjourned, and we'll move on to the Enterprise Zone Advisory Board meeting.